Rain hammered against the windows the night Ethan Cole realized something was terribly wrong. His wife, Lena, had said she had a late emergency meeting, but the clock had already crawled past 3 a.m., and their front door remained hauntingly still. He sat alone in the living room, the lamp casting long shadows across the walls, shadows that felt more honest than the woman he had married. He wasn't angry yet, just scared. Scared of the silence, scared of what it meant. Then morning came, and with it, a single text message from her phone, a message that wasn't meant for him, a message thanking someone else for last night, a message proving she had never planned to come home. And in that moment, Ethan knew this wasn't just a lie. It was the beginning of a much larger truth, one that would destroy everything he thought he understood about his marriage. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Rain hammered against the windows the night Ethan Cole realized something was terribly wrong. Not unusual rain, the kind that blankets Harborview every winter, but a relentless, needle-sharp downpour that made the world outside feel distant, sealed off. Inside the small suburban house he shared with his wife, everything was still, too still. The clock on the wall glowed, 12:47 a.m., then 1:32, then 2:15. Each jump forward felt like a breath he couldn't quite catch. Lena had said she had a work meeting, an urgent, last-minute thing, at Novalink Dynamics that she absolutely couldn't miss. She had rushed out the door, wearing a charcoal gray blazer, too elegant for a late corporate meeting. Ethan thought now, and carrying a faint scent of a new perfume he didn't recognize. At the time, he'd smiled, kissed her cheek, and told her to drive safely. He replayed that moment now, over and over, the way she'd lingered by the mirror, the way she'd checked her phone twice before answering his goodnight kiss, the way she'd said, "Don't wait up," in a tone that felt hopeful almost. But he had waited up. Hours passed, and the house that once made him feel safe now pressed down on him like a shrinking room. He moved restlessly between the window, the couch, the kitchen sink, unable to stay still, unable to silence the gnawing dread that crawled beneath his ribs. Something was off. Something was undeniably wrong. He tried rational explanations. Maybe the meeting ran long. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she fell asleep at the office after pulling a late shift. These things happened. Deadlines stacked up. Burnout pushed people into strange rhythms. But Lena wasn't the type to forget. She wasn't the type to vanish into silence. By 3:04 a.m., Ethan's hands were trembling around his phone. He had already called twice, both times going straight to voicemail. He left messages that sounded increasingly panicked. "Hey, are you okay? Call me. Lena, please, just text me something," He says, each minute without a reply, stretched like a rope pulling tighter against his throat. The rain finally softened, tapering into a thin mist that clung to the windows. Dawn crept in slowly, staining the sky with pale gray light. Sleep hit him in brief. Unwilling waves, 10 seconds. Then 20. Before paranoia pulled him awake again. When his phone buzzed, the sound tore through him like lightning. A text message. From Lena. Sent at 6:11 a.m. His breath broke out of him in relief. Finally. She was okay. She was alive. She was. Then he opened the message. The words didn't make sense at first. Like reading a sentence in a language he once knew but had forgotten. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Same time next week. I'll just say it's another late meeting. He always believes it. For a moment, Ethan thought the world had tilted. He stared at the screen, blinking hard, waiting for the text to rearrange itself into a normal explanation. A joke, a mistake, spam, anything. But no, there was more. A location. A name of a hotel he'd never heard her mention. The Meridian Loft. A winking emoji she had never once used with him in 8 years of marriage. And the most devastating sentence of all, he still thinks I was at work. He dropped the phone. It clattered against the hardwood floor, the screen blinking up at him like an accusation. His first instinct wasn't anger. It was disbelief, the kind that hollowed out his chest and left him gasping, because the woman he knew, the woman he woke up next to every morning, the woman he trusted so completely, he never once questioned her late nights. That woman would never write something like this, except she had. The evidence was right there in front of him. His marriage wasn't just cracked. It had collapsed overnight, silently, completely, while he sat awake, in the dark, thinking she might be hurt. In the cinematic haze of shock, fragments of memory began flashing like broken film reels. Lena stepping outside to take calls, trips, she said, were mandatory. Dinners canceled at the last minute. The perfume, the new lingerie he thought was for him, but she never once wore around him, pieces he couldn't unsee now, lining up into a truth he was terrified to accept. He picked up the phone again. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely type. His thumbs hovered over her name, Lena Cole, but he didn't hit call. He didn't text. Instead, he opened the message thread and read the words again. Slower this time, each read sliced deeper, peeling away the illusion of the life he thought he had. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a wrong number. It wasn't a joke. It was a confession. Just not meant for him. The rain outside brightened into sunlight, but its warmth couldn't reach him. He felt cold to the bone, as if someone had opened a window inside his chest and let the winter pour in. He stood up, walked to the kitchen, came back, sat down, stood up again. For several minutes he moved without thought, disoriented by a heartbreak too large to comprehend. Then something inside him hardened, a quiet shift, a small, determined ember, burning beneath the shock. He needed the truth, not assumptions, not the softened version she might feed him. He needed to see the place where she had been, the place she thought he would never know about. He grabbed his coat from the back of the sofa, keys from the bowl by the door, and stepped outside. The cold morning air slapped him awake. The world looked almost peaceful, sunshine breaking through fog, neighbors walking dogs, a jogger passing by with headphones. None of them knew that Ethan's life had split clean down the middle, and as he got into his car, adjusting the rearview mirror with a steadiness he didn't feel, a single thought pulsed through him like a heartbeat. If Lena had lied so easily, so boldly, what else had she hidden? He started the engine, typed the Meridian Loft into the GPS, and drove toward the beginning of a truth that would unravel everything he ever believed about the woman he had vowed to love. For most of his adult life, Ethan Cole had believed his marriage was one of the few stable things he could count on an anchor in a world that often felt unpredictable. Friends teased him about being too loyal, too trusting, the kind of man who still bought flowers without occasion and insisted on cooking dinner even after long shifts. But Ethan didn't mind the jokes. Loving Lena had never felt like a burden. It had felt like purpose. Their home in Harborview reflected that sense of quiet purpose. A modest two-story house with warm brick walls, a small garden where Lena once planted lavender, and photographs lining the hallway that documented nearly every milestone of their 8-year marriage. Their wedding day framed in soft gold, their first vacation to Crescent Cove, the night they adopted their dog, Arlo, long before he passed away. Those photos were lies now, Ethan thought. Or perhaps they were truths that no longer mattered, but back then, before the text message shattered him, those memories meant everything. Ethan's days were predictable, almost rhythmic. He woke early, made coffee for both of them, left a mug on the counter for Lena, with a little sticky note whenever she slept in after a long work week. He worked as an interior designer, mostly for small businesses around Harborview. People trusted him because he was patient, attentive, someone who actually listened when clients described how they wanted a space to feel, not just look. Lena had always said that was what she admired most about him, his ability to understand what wasn't said aloud. She used to joke that he read emotions better than she read spreadsheets. But somewhere along the line, Ethan had stopped noticing that she rarely let him read hers anymore. In the early years, they shared everything: grocery lists, inside jokes, Netflix passwords, the occasional late-night fear about the future. They cooked together, traveled together, laughed together. But as Lena climbed higher at Nova Link Dynamics, that closeness began to shift. At first it was subtle: a missed dinner here, a canceled weekend trip there. A new perfume, she said, was a gift from a client. Ethan remembered one evening, nearly a year before that devastating text message, when he'd waited with candles lit and a homemade pasta dish on the table. He'd planned the dinner for weeks, something small, something sweet, marking the anniversary of their first date. Lena had texted at 7 p.m., saying she was stuck in a meeting. She came home after midnight, exhausted, smelling faintly of the same perfume that would haunt Ethan months later. He had cleaned up the cold dinner before she walked in, not wanting her to feel guilty. That was the kind of man he was always choosing peace over confrontation, even when confrontation was deserved. Now, sitting alone in the same kitchen after receiving her accidental confession hours earlier, he replayed all those moments with a clarity that cut like glass. Had she been lying to him even then? Had he been a fool dressed in trust? Ethan leaned back against the chair and exhaled shakily, feeling the kind of pain that didn't stay in the chest, but traveled down his arms, into his throat, into the back of his skull. He tried to remember the last time Lena had genuinely seemed happy to see him. Not polite, not amused, not affectionate out of obligation, truly happy. The memory was faint, blurred at the edges. Maybe it had been years. He stood and walked into the living room, letting his fingers drift over the framed photos he once cherished. One by one, they felt like artifacts from a museum, items belonging to someone else's life, someone else's story. In one photo, Lena leaned against Ethan with a wide, bright smile, her hand resting over his heart. It looked genuine. He wanted to believe it had been, but now, suspicion seeped into everything. Was she already drifting then? Already hiding something? He didn't want to believe she had been cruel on purpose. He didn't want to believe their marriage had been nothing but a convenient disguise she could slip in and out of. But the text, that raw, intimate message not meant for him, made it impossible to cling to the comforting lie that this betrayal was sudden. Betrayal. Real betrayal never arrives suddenly. It accumulates quietly, and Ethan had ignored every early symptom. He remembered a conversation with Marcus, his closest friend since college. They had been drinking beers on Marcus's old balcony. When Marcus mentioned seeing Lena downtown with a man in a tailored suit, Ethan had laughed, brushing it off as a client, a coworker, someone from one of her many strategic networking projects. Marcus hadn't pushed. He respected Ethan too much to force suspicion onto him. But Ethan saw it now. Marcus hadn't believed the explanation. Ethan just didn't want to hear the truth. He had always trusted Lena completely, blindly, beautifully, tragically. Ethan sat again, this time on the floor beside the couch, his back against the cushion. He closed his eyes and tried to recall the version of her he fell in love with, the Lena with messy curls on Sunday mornings, the Lena who used to share late-night fries with him in their car, the Lena who once said, "You're the safest place I've ever known." That Lena didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. The clock struck 9 a.m. Lena still hadn't called. She still hadn't texted. He imagined her waking up beside the man from the message, Caleb, though he didn't yet know the name, stretching lazily, maybe laughing about her mistake, maybe panicking for a second before shrugging it off. A hot, acidic feeling rose in Ethan's throat. Jealousy, yes. But deeper than that, humiliation, the kind that burns because someone used your trust as a shield while they slipped behind your back. His breath trembled, but something else rose with it, a flicker of resolve. He couldn't stay in this house, drowning in questions. He couldn't sit silently while the woman he loved unraveled their life without looking him in the eye. He grabbed his wallet, phone, and jacket. As he walked out, he glanced once more at the photo of their wedding day. Lena's dress had shimmered in the sunlight. Ethan remembered thinking he had never seen anything so beautiful. Now, that image felt like fiction, a carefully edited frame in a story he no longer recognized. He locked the door behind him and stepped into the pale winter morning. Cars hummed along the street. A dog barked in the distance. Life went on, indifferent to his unraveling, but as he walked toward his car, Ethan knew one thing with absolute clarity. If there was still any truth left in his marriage, any at all, it was no longer inside this house. It was out there somewhere between the lies, the late nights, and the name of a hotel he couldn't get out of his head. He would find the truth, even if it destroyed him. Ethan didn't remember much about the drive into the city, only the steady pulse of the windshield wipers and the tightness in his chest that made breathing feel like a conscious task. The Meridian Loft sat on the edge of Harborview's business district, a place he'd driven past 100 times without ever noticing. It was the kind of hotel with tinted glass windows, stainless steel accents, and a glowing blue logo that felt deliberately discreet. A place meant for executives, business travelers, and secrets. When he pulled into the front entrance, his stomach twisted painfully. Standing there, looking at the building where his wife might have spent the night with another man, felt surreal, like watching someone else's tragedy unfold. But the message on his phone was real. The silence from Lena was real, and the feeling in his bones, the instinct that everything was about to change irrevocably, was painfully, brutally real. He parked the car and stepped out, the hotel's automatic doors sliding open with a soft hiss that felt too calm for the chaos spinning in his mind. The lobby smelled faintly of citrus and expensive furniture polish. Warm yellow lights reflected off marble floors. A few guests lingered near the seating area, sipping coffee, scrolling their phones, unaware that the world had just cracked open beneath one of the men walking past them. Ethan approached the front desk. A young woman with a neat bun and a navy blazer smiled in the polite, polished way hotel staff are trained to smile. "Good morning, sir. How may I help you?" He swallowed, unsure how to begin. The words felt heavy, sticking to the inside of his throat. I'm looking for my wife. I believe she may have checked in last night." His voice broke, despite his effort to keep it steady. The receptionist blinked, her expression softening with concern. "I'm very sorry, sir, but we can't provide guest information. She didn't come home," Ethan cut in. His voice was low but intense, cracking with exhaustion. "And I need to know she's safe." Something flickered in the woman's eyes, a crack in the professional mask. Maybe pity, maybe discomfort. "I understand," she said gently. "But without her permission, we can't." He placed his phone on the counter, screen facing up, the text from Lena glaring in bold white letters. The receptionist's breath caught. She looked at the message, then at Ethan, then back at the message. The polite smile vanished entirely. "Please," he whispered, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to know if she was here. That's all." The woman hesitated, scanning the lobby to ensure no supervisors were watching. Then, lowering her voice to a faint whisper, she said, "Sir, please don't tell anyone I said this, but yes, she checked in last night." Ethan felt something inside him crumble, even though he already knew. Hearing it aloud made the reality heavier. "With someone," the receptionist added reluctantly. "A man. I can't give you his details." He swallowed a painful lump in his throat. "Did they leave together?" She hesitated again, then nodded. "Around 5:30 this morning." So Lena had been awake, had been fine, had been with him, whoever he was, while Ethan spent the night pacing their house, terrified she was dead on the side of a highway. His hands curled into fists. "What about cameras?" he asked, though deep down he knew the answer. "I'm sorry, only management and security can access those, and only under certain circumstances. Of course, a hotel built on discretion wouldn't just hand over evidence. Sir," she added gently, "if your wife didn't come home, maybe you should talk to her, not the hotel staff." Ethan almost laughed at the irony. Talk to Lena, when she couldn't even talk to him enough to cover her tracks properly. But he thanked the woman quietly. He knew she had risked her job just by giving him that much. When he turned away from the desk, he felt dizzy. The room swayed slightly. Or maybe it was just the weight of the truth trying to pull him down. He walked toward the seating area and sat in a corner armchair. The cushion sank beneath him, the world suddenly too soft for the hardness inside his chest. A couple nearby was laughing. A businessman argued into a headset about revenue projections. Normal life continued in the background, while his own life was unraveling strand by strand. He opened his phone again. The message still sat there, bright and cruel. He reread it as if trying to force the words into a different meaning. But they didn't change. They never would. Last night was incredible. He always believes it. Same time next week. Next week. She had already planned the next lie, the next betrayal. The next night, he would sit alone while she gave pieces of herself to someone else. Ethan felt anger begin to rise, not the explosive kind, but a slow, simmering burn that spread through his chest and arms, warming the cold places despair had carved out. For years, he had admired Lena's ambition, her sharpness, the way she walked into rooms and owned them. He had thought her confidence was beautiful. Now he wondered, had he mistaken control for confidence, manipulation for strength, distance for independence? How long had she been slipping away from him? He closed his eyes and remembered the night she told him she got promoted to senior manager. He had taken her to dinner. He had toasted to her success. And yet, even then, he remembered her staring at her phone more than usual, responding quickly, smiling at messages she never showed him. That was a year ago. How deep did the lies go? He stood, steadier this time. The hotel lobby felt suffocating, and he needed air that hadn't been contaminated by truth. When he stepped outside, the air was crisp, sharp against his lungs. The city hummed with early weekday energy cars rushing by, people hurrying to offices, the faint rumble of construction somewhere in the distance. A world that didn't care his marriage was dying. He walked to his car and leaned against the cool metal door. Closing his eyes, he needed answers, not guesses, not assumptions, answers from the one person who still owed him honesty, even if it came too late. He climbed into the car and turned on the ignition. The engine rumbled awake, quiet but insistent. He pulled out of the parking lot, the hotel shrinking in his rearview mirror, until it was just another building in a city full of secrets. But as he drove, one thought pressed harder and harder against him. If Lena lied so easily about where she was, what else had she lied about? His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. He wasn't going home to cry on the couch. He wasn't going to drown in confusion. He was going to confront her. Today, before she had time to prepare another lie. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the determination, he felt fear coil like a shadow, because confronting Lena might reveal truths even darker than what he had already uncovered. And some truths don't just break marriages, they break people. Yet Ethan had no choice. His life, his sanity, and his identity as a husband, all of it now depended on the answers. Waiting at the end of this unraveling thread of lies, he pressed harder on the gas pedal, heading toward the one place he had once called safe, home, or what was left of it. Morning light filtered through the blinds when Ethan finally stepped back into the house, but the brightness did nothing to soften the heaviness inside him. The silence that greeted him was the same silence he'd sat with the night before, except now it felt sharper, shaped by knowledge instead of fear. Knowledge hurt more. Fear at least had room for hope. He placed his keys on the counter mechanically, as though his body were on autopilot. His mind replayed the hotel lobby, the receptionist's sympathetic eyes, the words, "She checked in last night," echoing like a blade slicing through everything familiar. He wanted to scream. He wanted to break something. But Ethan had never been that man. He walked into the kitchen and poured himself water, then couldn't bring the glass to his lips. His hand shook too much. He set it down and pressed both palms flat against the counter, grounding himself against the cold granite. That was when his phone buzzed. He flinched like someone had slapped him. The screen lit up with a new message from Lena. He stared at her name for several seconds before unlocking the phone. She had finally remembered her husband existed. Apparently, morning, sorry about last night. My phone died. Slept at the office. Ethan let out a humorless laugh, a brittle, broken sound. She was still lying. Even after a night in another man's bed, even after sending the wrong text, even after disappearing for 14 hours, Lena still thought she could smooth it all over with the same practiced lies she'd used for months. He typed back slowly, "Call me." The message delivered instantly. She saw it, and then nothing. Seconds passed. A minute, 2 minutes. Then finally, the screen lit up. Incoming call. Lena. Ethan inhaled and answered. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, exhausted like she was the one who'd spent the night pacing in agony. "Where are you?" Ethan asked. His tone was unnervingly calm, even to him. "At work," she said quickly. Too quickly. "We had a major campaign issue last night, and I—" "Lena," he interrupted gently. "You're already lying." Silence. It stretched long enough that he could hear her breathing subtly, shift tightening, sharpening, transforming. "What are you talking about?" she asked, that familiar defensive edge crawling into her tone. "You didn't sleep at the office." More silence. Then a forced laugh. "Of course I did. Ethan, I'm sorry I didn't text, but it was chaotic and—" "You were at the Meridian Loft." Everything on the other end of the line went still. Even her breathing seemed to freeze. Ethan continued, his voice controlled, deliberate. "I know you checked in last night. I know you didn't leave alone. I know the front desk saw you, and I know your phone wasn't dead." When Lena finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. No more feigned softness, no more exhaustion. Instead, irritation, accusation. "How dare you go digging into my private? How dare you lie to me?" Ethan whispered. The tremor in his voice wasn't from fear. It was grief. "I didn't lie," she snapped. "You're overreacting. Whoever you talked to saw wrong. You always jump to conclusions when you're stressed." He closed his eyes, gaslighting the kind he hadn't recognized before. Now he saw it clearly. "Lena," he said quietly, "stop. Just stop." A heavy exhale came through the phone, followed by a brittle, annoyed tone. "Fine. If you want to accuse me, go ahead. Clearly you've already decided who I am." "No," Ethan said. "You decided that when you sent a text meant for someone else." Another pause, this one longer. He could feel the entire conversation shifting, like watching a mask crack, pieces falling to the ground. Then Lena's voice returned, colder, steadier, sharper. "That text was a joke." His stomach twisted. "A joke." "Yes," she insisted. "A stupid joke between coworkers. You misunderstood, and even if you did see something at the hotel, you probably misheard. They get names wrong all the time." He cut her off again, but this time his voice held an edge she had never heard from him before. "Lena, they described you." The silence that followed wasn't defensive. It was incriminating, and Ethan felt the final, fragile thread of denial snap inside him. She wasn't going to admit it, not because she was innocent, but because she had grown so comfortable in the persona she built, the untouchable, brilliant, composed woman who was always one step ahead of everyone else. "You're twisting things," she said sharply. "And honestly, Ethan, the fact that you would stalk me, stalk you," he echoed, stunned. "I thought you were missing. I thought something happened to you. I called hospitals. I called the police. I spent the entire night terrified. And now you want to make this my fault." Lena shot back. "Because you decided to overreact." His eyes stung, but he didn't cry. The tears weren't there anymore, only clarity. "You're lying," he said softly. "Not an accusation, a statement of fact." "Believe whatever you want," she replied, her tone icy, almost bored. "I don't have time for this. I have a real job. I'll talk to you later when you've calmed down." She hung up. Just like that. She ended the call, ended the conversation, ended whatever illusion of partnership they once had. Ethan stared at the phone in disbelief. His ears rang. He lowered the device slowly, like handling something fragile and dangerous. Then something unexpected happened. He stopped shaking. For the first time since last night, he felt steady, clear. Her reaction told him everything he needed to know. He walked into the living room and sat down. The house felt different now, smaller but also sharper. Like he could finally see it without the fog of love blurring the edges. He replayed the call in his head. The lies, the defensiveness, the manipulation, the complete lack of remorse. Lena wasn't afraid of being caught. She was angry she had been inconvenienced by being caught. And that, more than the hotel, more than the text, broke something fundamental inside him. Ethan buried his face in his hands, not crying, but processing, accepting, recognizing a truth that had been waiting behind the curtain the whole time. The woman he loved wasn't just unfaithful. She was unrecognizable. And if he wanted answers, real answers, he wouldn't get them from Lena, not willingly, not honestly. He would have to seek them elsewhere, at her workplace, in her patterns, in the version of her life that existed outside their home, one she had guarded from him so fiercely. He lifted his head, eyes tired but lucid. He wasn't done, not even close. If Lena wouldn't tell him the truth, he would find it on his own. And as that resolve settled into his bones, Ethan realized something even more painful. This was no longer about saving his marriage. This was about saving himself. Ethan drove to Novalink Dynamics with a tension in his body that felt like tightly coiled wire. Every breath he took seemed too shallow, too quick, as though the air itself resisted entering his lungs. The office building rose ahead of him, sleek, modern, all dark glass panels and polished steel edges. It looked like the kind of place where ambition thrived and honesty suffocated. He had been here before company dinners, holiday events, the occasional lunch date when Lena asked him to meet her nearby. Back then, the building had seemed impressive. Now it looked ominous, almost predatory, like it held something he wasn't meant to see. He parked and sat for a moment inside the car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared to unravel the parts of Lena's life he had never questioned, never scrutinized. But the truth was a weight pulling him forward, relentless, demanding. He stepped out onto the pavement. Inside, the lobby buzzed with morning activity. Men and women in tailored suits moved briskly through the space with coffee in hand, their conversations clipped and urgent. No one noticed Ethan. He blended into the flow like a ghost drifting through a world that no longer aligned with his own. He approached the front desk, trying to sound casual. "I'm here to drop something off for my wife," he said, using the same line he had rehearsed on the drive. Lena Cole. She forgot something at home. The receptionist, a different woman from the hotel, younger, distracted, barely glanced up. "You can leave it here. I'd prefer to hand it to her." A small lie. No item. Just desperation. The receptionist hesitated. "She hasn't checked in yet," Ethan blinked. "Haven't checked in. She's not here this morning," the woman clarified. "At least not yet." A chill slid down his spine. Lena had told him she was already at the office. Another lie layered onto the mountain of others. He thanked the receptionist and stepped aside, trying not to look unsteady. He considered leaving, searching for answers elsewhere, but then he saw her, Sarah Linwood. A friendly face. One of the few co-workers Lena had ever spoken of warmly. Sarah was petite, with soft curls and an energy that always seemed warm, approachable. She recognized Ethan immediately and waved before walking over. "Ethan." "You're here early," she said with a smile, though her eyes flicked with curiosity. "Everything okay?" No, nothing was okay, but he forced a polite nod. "I'm actually looking for Lena. She didn't come home last night, big emergency meeting," she said. "I was hoping to catch her for a minute." Sarah's smile faded into confusion. Emergency meeting. Last night. Yes. Ethan pressed, watching her expression closely. There wasn't any meeting, she said slowly. Not after 6:30. The whole department left early. We wrapped up the client overview yesterday afternoon. Ethan felt the floor shift beneath him. Are you sure? Positive? Sarah replied. I worked late myself, but I left at 8. Lena wasn't here. 8. Lena had left the house shortly before that, Sarah continued. She said she was meeting a client off-site, a big account. She seemed stressed, but excited. Excited. The word stung, and, Sarah added carefully, she wasn't alone. She had a consultant with her. Ethan's breath hitched. Do you know his name? Sarah hesitated, biting her lip. I probably shouldn't say. Sarah, Ethan said quietly. Please. Maybe it was the tremor in his voice. Maybe it was the way he looked exhausted, betrayed, muted in a way that made her soften. After a moment, she exhaled. Caleb Rowan. The name dropped into Ethan's stomach like a stone. A stranger's name. But not a stranger anymore, not after last night's message. Do you know him? Ethan asked, steadying himself. A bit, Sarah replied. He's charismatic, the sort of guy people trust quickly, but not always for good reasons. What does that mean? Sarah shifted her weight. Office gossip says he's persuasive, too persuasive. He's smooth, confident, and some people think he uses it to get what he wants. He's helped on several projects, but what? Sarah leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. There are rumors he's been inappropriate with female employees. Nothing confirmed. HR always steps around it, but Lena seemed close to him, more than colleagues usually are. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Close, excited, meeting off-site. Consultant, pieces aligned into a horrifying shape. Sarah's expression softened with concern. Is everything okay between you two? Ethan forced a breath. I don't know. I hope she's okay, Sarah said gently. She's been distant lately. Stressed, not herself. Maybe something's going on at home. He swallowed hard. If only she knew. Thank you, Sarah, he said quietly. Really. As he turned to leave, Sarah touched his arm, briefly. If you talk to Lena, tell her I'm here if she needs anything. And Ethan. He looked at her. She really did seem different lately. Like she had one foot in another world. Another world, another man, another life he knew nothing about. He walked toward the exit slowly, each step heavy. Outside, the air felt colder than before. His heart pounded against his ribs, not in panic this time, but in a rising certainty. Lena had been lying not just to him, but to everyone. She wasn't caught in a moment of weakness. She had built an entire parallel life with someone else. As he reached the car, he leaned against the door, trying to steady himself. The street sounds felt distant, muffled. The truth was no longer a shadow. It was a shape now, a shape with a name. Caleb Rowan. Ethan closed his eyes, swallowing hard. The next step felt inevitable. If he wanted the full truth, he needed to confront Lena face to face, not over the phone, not through half-truths or deflections. He needed to see her expression when he laid everything bare. He needed her lies to collapse in real time. But beneath that resolve, another question gnawed at him. Quiet, insistent. If she had fallen this far into deception, what else might she be hiding? His phone vibrated. A new message from Lena. I'll be home tonight. We can talk then. Ethan stared at the words. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I love you. Just a schedule. A controlled, distant, rehearsed line. He typed no response. There was nothing left to text. Tonight, he would see her. Tonight, he would hear her excuses. Tonight, he would discover just how deep her betrayal ran. And tonight, the marriage he once believed unbreakable would face its reckoning. He started the car. The engine hummed softly as he pulled away from Novalink, away from the pieces of Lena's other life that had been hiding in plain sight. But as he drove home, one thing became painfully clear. this was only the beginning. Ethan spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, half present, half trapped inside the growing storm of everything he'd uncovered. Every detail he'd gathered pressed against him like weights. The receptionist's whispered confirmation, the text message meant for someone else, the lie Lena delivered so effortlessly over the phone, and the name Sarah had reluctantly given him. Caleb Rowan, a man Ethan had never met, yet somehow he was standing in the ruins of Ethan's marriage like a silent intruder. The house felt colder than usual when Ethan returned home. Shadows clung to corners, turning familiar furniture into hollow silhouettes. He sat on the couch where he had waited the night before, reminded once again of how naive he had been, how easily he had believed Lena's stories, because the alternative felt impossible. He checked his phone repeatedly. No new messages from Lena. No accidental confessions. No corrections to the lies she had already told. The hours dragged on, slow and heavy. Finally, around 6:43 p.m., Ethan heard the click of the front door unlocking. His entire body stiffened. The door opened, and Lena stepped inside. Her hair was neatly tied back, her blazer hanging over her arm as though she'd come from a normal day at work. Her face held an expression he recognized, a carefully curated calm she used during office conflicts or high-pressure situations. But in her eyes, there was something else, a flicker of calculation. She looked at him, not startled, not guilty, almost annoyed. "So," she said simply, dropping her bag onto the counter. "You wanted to talk." Ethan stared at her, struck by how ordinary she seemed, how someone could look so unchanged while everything inside him had been shredded apart. He stood slowly. "Where were you last night?" Lena sighed, rolling her eyes slightly. "I already told you. Work emergency. Stop." His voice was quiet, but the firmness in it startled even Lena. Her brows lifted. Ethan continued, "Don't lie. Not again." She crossed her arms. "You clearly don't want to hear the truth anyway." "I want the real truth," he said. "Not the version you think will make this easier for you." Lena's jaw tightened, a thin crack in her composure. "You're being dramatic." Ethan's laugh escaped harshly. "Dramatic? Lena, you disappeared all night. You ignored my calls. You lied to me twice. And I know you weren't at the office." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And how do you know that?" "Because I went there today." The slightest twitch crossed her expression, surprise she hadn't expected to feel. "You went to my work?" she asked, voice starting to sharpen. "Ethan, do you even hear how intrusive that is? I thought you were missing." His voice cracked. "I thought something happened to you." She blinked. For a moment, just a flash guilt flickered. Then it vanished. "You should have waited for me to come home." "You weren't coming home," Ethan replied. "You were at a hotel." Lena froze. He watched the mask she wore strain under pressure. The careful poise she had perfected began to fracture in slow motion. "Who told you that?" she finally asked, voice dangerously quiet. "Someone who saw you," he said. "Someone who saw you check in. Someone who saw you leave with him." Lena's eyes flickered. A microsecond of panic. Then the mask settled back into place. "So that's what this is about," she said. "Some receptionist thinks she saw me. And now you're interrogating me like a criminal?" "Not like a criminal," Ethan said softly. "Like a husband who deserves honesty." "That's rich," she muttered, "acting like you're the victim here." He stared at her, stunned. "How am I not?" "You invaded my privacy," she snapped. "You drove to my office. You're accusing me based on rumors and assumptions." "And a text message," Ethan said quietly. "A message you sent this morning. To the wrong person." The room fell silent. Lena swallowed once. Her composure trembled, but she didn't admit anything. She didn't apologize. Instead, she shifted into a different tactic, a colder one. "That message," she began carefully, "was a mistake. A stupid joke. Caleb and I." "So you do know Caleb?" Ethan said, Though the confirmation was unnecessary, Lena hesitated. That was all the answer he needed. Yes, she said finally, chin lifting. He's a consultant. We've worked together on multiple projects. And, Ethan pressed. And nothing, she said sharply. He's a colleague. You're blowing something innocent out of proportion. Ethan stepped closer. You don't send messages like that to a colleague. Lena's eyes hardened. You know what? I'm done explaining myself. You've already decided I'm guilty. Nothing I say matters. Lena, Ethan whispered, desperate for even the smallest sign of remorse. Just tell me the truth. She stared at him, and in her eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. Not anger, not fear, contempt. You want the truth, she said. Fine. You've been suffocating me. For months, I feel trapped in this marriage, trapped in this house, trapped in your expectations, Caleb. He listens. He understands me. He doesn't judge. Her words sliced through him like blades. So yes, I spent time with him, she continued coldly, more than I should have. And honestly, I don't regret it. The world didn't end. No thunder, no dramatic collapse. Just a quiet, devastating, unraveling Ethan in front of her, breaking silently while she watched without flinching. He felt something inside him fracture beyond repair, not because she cheated, but because she didn't care. Not about him, not about their vows, not about the 8 years they had built together. He took a step back, needing space to breathe. Why didn't you just tell me you were unhappy? Because you never listen, she said simply. You hear what you want to hear. And honestly, Ethan, you're predictable. Safe, but safe is boring. I wanted more. Those last words hollowed him. He steadied himself against the counter. And Caleb gave you more. Her silence was enough. Ethan inhaled shakily. Are you in love with him? Lena looked away. I don't know, but that wasn't the truth. He could tell. She did know. She just didn't have the courage or the respect to say it aloud. He nodded slowly, understanding, at last, that the woman standing in front of him wasn't the woman he married. Or maybe she was, and he had simply never seen the truth beneath her ambition and polished facade. Get your things, Ethan said softly. What? She snapped. Leave, he whispered. We're done for today. I can't look at you right now, Lena scoffed. You don't get to kick me out of my own house. Ethan met her gaze, steady, calm, absolutely broken, but no longer blinded. I'm not kicking you out, he said. I'm asking you to leave before I say things I can't take back. For the first time, her expression faltered. She grabbed her bag, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Ethan stood in the ringing silence she left behind. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He simply let the truth finally settle into the hollow space her lies had carved out. The marriage was already gone. Last night only made it official. But tonight was only the first collapse. There were deeper truths ahead, truths he hadn't even begun to uncover. And one way or another, he would face them. The silence after Lena left felt like a pressure chamber. Ethan stood motionless for a long time, as though moving might shatter whatever fragile pieces of himself were still clinging together. The house seemed too quiet, too still, like even the walls were holding their breath, waiting for him to fall apart. But he didn't. Not yet. Shock had numbed him into something close to clarity. He walked slowly to the dining table and sat down, folding his hands together, as though bracing himself for impact. He replayed Lena's words again and again. You're predictable, safe, boring. Caleb understands me. I don't regret it. He exhaled a trembling breath. Love had never made him feel small before. Until now, the clock ticked in the background, steady and indifferent. As Ethan stared at the empty chair across from him, he imagined Lena sitting there just months ago, smiling after long days, teasing him about over-seasoning food, telling him about office gossip. How much of it had been real? How much had she crafted to keep up the illusion of a functioning marriage while she lived a second life behind his back? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him. He needed answers. Real ones beyond emotional betrayal. Because something in Lena's behavior didn't just feel cruel. It felt calculated. Her defensiveness at the mention of Caleb, her insistence on calling Ethan's pain dramatic, her irritation, not guilt, when confronted, and the biggest red flag, she hadn't been surprised he knew about the hotel. She had been angry. Angry he had dared to uncover something she couldn't control. That detail stuck to Ethan's mind like a splinter. He rose from the table and walked into the home office, Lena's preferred workspace. Papers were scattered on the desk, a planner half open, her sleek black laptop sitting atop a stack of reports. Ethan hesitated before approaching it. He had never invaded her privacy before. But privacy meant something different when the person hiding behind it was already betraying him. He reached for her planner first. Flipping through the pages, he expected appointments, tasks, meeting notes, and yes, those were there. But sprinkled among them were odd gaps. Days labeled simply with offsite or meeting, X'd. Several evenings circled in red. Several evenings. Dates that meant nothing to him until he checked them against his own memory. Half of those nights were evenings she claimed to be working late. 2 fell on weekends she insisted she had volunteered for extra shifts. He felt the sting of betrayal sharpen, but he kept flipping. Halfway through the planner, a sticky note slipped out. A phone number, no name, just 9 digits, scrawled hastily. He didn't need to call it to know who it belonged to. His chest tightened. But this wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed to understand the full scope of the lies, because something inside him whispered that the affair was only the surface of a deeper, darker truth. He powered on Lena's laptop. A password prompt appeared. Of course, she'd never told him the password, yet she expected transparency from him. His mind sifted through possibilities, though he doubted she'd be obvious. Birthday? No. Their anniversary? Probably not. Their dog's name? Unlikely. He tried her old password, the one she had used years ago before climbing the corporate ladder. Lena C. 92. Incorrect. He sighed, rubbing his temple, about to give up, when a memory surfaced, months back. She'd changed her login after complaining about company security protocols. She had laughed and mentioned she finally chose something she wouldn't forget because she saw it every day. Every day. What did she see every day? Ethan's breath slowed. He typed, Novalink 001. The screen blinked, then opened. A rush of cold moved through him. He navigated carefully, checking her email first. He expected flirtations, maybe a thread or two of suspicious scheduling. Instead, he found something else entirely. Reports, attachments, financial breakdowns, large files forwarded to an external email address, one that clearly wasn't official, Rowan. Consulting at private mail, net, not once, not twice, but dozens of times. Spreadsheets, labeled Budget Projections Q2, presentations titled Merger Overview Confidential, documents marked Internal Do Not Distribute, each one forwarded from Lena's work email to Caleb's private address. Ethan's stomach clenched. This wasn't just an affair. This was corporate misconduct, maybe even embezzlement or data theft. Jesus, what had she gotten herself into? He kept scrolling, his breath growing shallow. An email from Caleb to Lena appeared. We're close. Once the presentation is finalized, Novalink will push it through without even checking the source trail. They trust you. Don't mess this up now. His heart pounded loudly in his ears. Another email. If this works, we'll finally have the capital we need. He'll never know what hit him. Who was he? The CEO, another investor, or worse, Ethan himself. Could she have used their joint accounts, their savings? Had she siphoned money into something connected to Caleb? He opened their bank app on his phone. Suddenly desperate, their joint account history was long, but now patterns emerged he had overlooked for months. Repeated transfers to a business entity he didn't recognize. Consulting fees, project development, account retainer. The amounts varied: $300, $700, $1,000, $200, small enough to avoid suspicion individually, but together forming a clear trail, and all of them tied to one name, Rowan Consultancy. His vision blurred, his chest felt tight. He stumbled back from the desk, the truth closing in around him like a slow suffocation. Lena wasn't just unfaithful. She was involved in something illegal, and she had dragged their money into it. He pressed a hand to his forehead, trying to steady his breath. He had confronted her about the affair. He had confronted her about her lies. But this was bigger than infidelity. This was betrayal on a structural level, a betrayal that could ruin him financially, legally, emotionally. Footsteps outside startled him. He jerked his head toward the window. A shadow passed by. A neighbor. But Ethan's heart still hammered. He felt exposed, watched, as though stepping into this truth had put him on a path he couldn't walk back from. His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Heard from Sarah. Call me when you can. You okay? No, he wasn't okay. He was unraveling, but he typed back. Can I come over? Marcus replied instantly. Doors open. Ethan closed Lena's laptop, leaving it exactly as he found it. He collected himself, grabbed his keys again, and walked outside. The air felt colder now, sharper, more dangerous, because now he understood something he hadn't before. The affair wasn't the cause of Lena's downfall. It was the symptom, the side effect of something far more deliberate. Whatever she and Caleb were involved in, it wasn't accidental. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't romantic. It was strategic, manipulative, criminal, and Ethan had no idea how deep it went, but he was about to find out, whether he wanted to or not. The sun had dipped low by the time Ethan made it to Marcus's apartment, the sky painted in streaks of fading orange and bruised purple. Harborview looked almost peaceful from the balcony, a quiet lie draped over a city full of hidden fractures. Marcus lived on the third floor of an older building, the kind with peeling paint and uneven steps, but Ethan always felt strangely grounded there. Less pressure, less expectation. Marcus opened the door before Ethan even knocked. His expression softened the moment he saw his friend. Jesus, man, he muttered. You look like you've been hit by a truck. I feel like it. Ethan replied, a voice low and tired. Marcus stepped aside to let him in. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet, a scent Ethan had come to associate with honesty. No pretenses, no masks. They sat at the kitchen table. A single dim light flickered above them, the buzz of the bulb filling the silence Ethan didn't know how to break. Talk, Marcus finally said. Start from the beginning. Not the short version. It took Ethan several seconds to gather his thoughts. His throat felt thick, as though each word had to crawl its way out. She didn't come home last night, he began. She said she had a late meeting, but she turned off her phone. Never called, never checked in. Marcus's expression darkened. This morning, Ethan continued, I got a text from her phone, meant for someone else. He pulled out his phone. Sliding it across the table, Marcus read the message, and the muscle in his jaw tightened. Damn, he muttered. Ethan. I'm sorry. I went to the hotel she mentioned, Ethan said. The Meridian Loft. They confirmed she checked in with a man, and she left with him early this morning. Marcus cursed under his breath. And then, Ethan added, I confronted her. He described the conversation, the lies, the anger, the gaslighting. The part where she said he was predictable and boring, the way she took no responsibility, no remorse. I knew she wasn't telling the full truth, Ethan said, voice cracking slightly. But then I checked her laptop. He explained everything he found, the forwarded documents, the confidential files sent to a private email address, the financial transfers to Rowan Consultancy. Marcus leaned back slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. So she's not just cheating. She might be committing corporate fraud. I think so, Ethan whispered. And she's using our money to do it. A long silence followed. The weight of everything settled between them like fog. Ethan, Marcus said carefully, you need to talk to a lawyer. I know. No. I mean now. Tonight. Before she does something else, before she tries to pin any of this on you, the suggestion made Ethan's stomach flip. You think she would do that? Marcus gave him a look he wished he hadn't. Based on what you just told me, she's already lying to protect herself. If this blows up at work, she'll drag down anyone she has to. The truth of that sank deep, too deep. Ethan lowered his head into his hands. How did I miss this? How did I not see who she was becoming? Marcus sighed and leaned forward. Because you're a good man, you don't expect the worst in people. You never thought you had to look for the dark parts. I should have, Ethan said quietly. No, Marcus corrected. She should have been honest. She should have respected the man she married. Ethan swallowed hard, fighting the burn behind his eyes. He had cried enough in private. He refused to break again. Not here. Not now. Marcus stood and grabbed 2 glasses. I'm making coffee, he said. You look like you haven't slept in weeks. While the machine sputtered to life, Ethan stared at the chipped edge of the table. His thoughts circled in endless, painful loops. What does she want with him? He asked quietly. Why Caleb? Marcus poured the coffee and handed Ethan a mug. Guys like that, they know how to manipulate. They know exactly what to say to someone ambitious, someone unhappy, someone easy to flatter. And Ethan absorbed those words slowly. You think she was unhappy? Marcus hesitated. I think she was restless. That's different. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Restless enough to betray her company. Her marriage, everything. Restlessness doesn't excuse anything, Marcus said. But guys like Caleb, they feed on people who want more. More validation, more excitement, more risk. Ethan stared down at his coffee. She said, I was predictable. You were steady, loyal, safe. Marcus took a sip of his cup. Some people don't know the difference between safety and boredom until it's too late. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhausted. His heart still ached, but now there was something new brewing inside him. A slow burning anger, replacing the hollow grief. What do I do now? He whispered. About her. About Caleb. About everything. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He tapped his fingers against the table, choosing his words. You gather proof, he said finally. Everything you can. Make copies, screenshots, emails, bank statements. If this explodes, and it will, you need to protect yourself. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing the advice. And Ethan, Marcus added, locking eyes with him. You stop thinking of her as your wife. The sentence struck him harder than he expected. It wasn't cruel, just true, painfully. Inevitably true. She stopped being your wife when she chose him, Marcus continued. When she lied, when she used your money for whatever this scheme is. Ethan closed his eyes. Don't let her drag you down with her, Marcus said softly. She's already halfway down the hole. You're still standing on the edge. Ethan inhaled shakily. I don't want to hurt her. Marcus raised an eyebrow. She doesn't mind hurting you. The words hit like ice water. You're not doing this to punish her, Marcus said. You're doing this to survive. Ethan looked at him, finally seeing the truth he had been avoiding. His loyalty to Lena could cost him everything. His savings, his reputation, even his freedom. If she pulled him into the corporate mess she was creating, I'll do it, Ethan said quietly. I'll gather everything. Marcus nodded. Good, and I'll help. They spent the next few hours talking through what Ethan had found, what it meant legally, what steps he needed to take to distance himself. Marcus asked questions Ethan hadn't even thought to ask. Why was Lena sending confidential files? What did Caleb gain from this scheme? Was Novalink already missing assets? Were other employees involved? Had Lena forged any signatures on joint accounts? Every answer only deepened the pit in Ethan's stomach. Sometime past midnight, after the caffeine had settled into his system and exhaustion began to press heavily on his shoulders, Ethan stood to leave. Stay here, Marcus offered. Crash on the couch, but Ethan shook his head. I need to go home. I need to face what's left of my life. Marcus clapped a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone, Ethan. Whatever happens next, you've got someone in your corner. Ethan managed a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Thank you. When he stepped outside, the night air was crisp against his skin. He looked up at the sky, clouds drifting slowly, the faint glow of the city lights, dimming the stars. For the first time since discovering the truth, Ethan didn't feel like he was drowning. He felt like he was preparing for a war he never asked for, but could no longer walk away from. The affair was only the beginning. Now he knew. Lena's secrets ran deeper than love or lust. They ran into lies that could ruin careers, reputations, even lives. And tomorrow, he would confront her again. Not as a heartbroken husband, but as a man determined to uncover every truth she had buried. The house was quiet when Ethan returned, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a place that had witnessed too many lies. He locked the door behind him and leaned against it, letting the cool wood press into his back as he tried to steady himself. Marcus's words echoed in his head. You stopped thinking of her as your wife. He hadn't fully accepted that yet. His heart hadn't caught up to the truth. His mind was already screaming, but something inside him had shifted. The Ethan who blindly trusted Lena, who softened whenever she raised her voice, who forgave every unexplained late night he wasn't here anymore. What remained was someone raw, betrayed, and forced to grow sharper by necessity. The clock on the wall read 1:18 a.m. Ethan exhaled slowly. He knew he couldn't sleep, not with the weight of everything pressing against his ribs. Instead, he walked to the dining room table and turned on the light. The soft glow spilled across the wooden surface, illuminating the scattered receipts, bank statements, and documents he had grabbed earlier. He sat down and began laying everything out carefully, one page at a time. Every piece of paper held a small truth, a sliver of the life Lena had built behind his back. The financial statements revealed transactions he'd never noticed. Transfers to Rowan Consultancy, charges at restaurants he'd never been to, hotel bookings under vague abbreviations. The earlier ones were small, almost invisible, but over time, the numbers grew bolder, riskier, more confident in the assumption that Ethan wouldn't notice or wouldn't question, and he hadn't. Not because he didn't care, but because he trusted her more than he trusted himself. He tightened his jaw and kept sorting. The receipts told a clearer story. Expensive meals at upscale restaurants, Ubers charged late at night, purchases that didn't match Lena's usual patterns. She'd always been careful with money, meticulous, even. But in the past year, her spending habits had changed. She began charging things to their joint account rather than her own. At the time, Ethan brushed it off. Work expenses, she'd say. I'll get reimbursed. He never questioned when the reimbursements didn't come. Near the bottom of the pile, he found a printed email confirmation for a flight booked 2 months ago. One ticket, one way. Destination: Seattle. Lena had never mentioned a business trip there. His stomach twisted. Caleb lived in Seattle. Ethan sat back, breath unsteady. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was logistical. Planned, coordinated. Every document felt like another brick thrown at the foundation of the life he had built. He rubbed his eyes. Sleep would be useless tonight. Answers were the only thing keeping him upright. He opened Lena's laptop again, careful to remember how it had been positioned earlier. The email inbox stared back at him, full of tiny betrayals. But this time he looked closer, digging through expanded threads and older messages. A subject line caught his eye. Transfer update. When he opened it, his chest tightened. The thread detailed financial movements, small amounts, siphoned from their joint account into a secondary account Ethan didn't recognize. Payments masked as consulting fees. The messages from Caleb were strategically worded, but undeniably shady. Keep using the shared account until the merger goes through. He won't notice unless you make it obvious. Ethan's blood ran cold. He won't notice. They had talked about him like he was an obstacle, a fool, a convenient blind spot. Another message. We need to move fast. Novalink's due diligence team is getting stricter. Ethan scrolled. Did he ask anything? He's the only variable left. Variable, not husband, not person. A variable. Ethan's breath shook. For the first time, he wasn't just heartbroken. He was angry. A deep, simmering anger that came from the realization that Lena had not only betrayed him, but used him, manipulated him, lied directly into his face while stealing from the life they built together. He closed the laptop gently. If he closed it too hard, he feared he'd break something besides plastic. His phone buzzed suddenly, startling him. A message from an unknown number. We need to talk. It's important. He froze. Was it Caleb? Another burner number. Someone from Novalink. Another message came in. Please don't tell Lena I reached out. His heart skipped. Then a third message. This is Sarah. I have something you need to know. He exhaled shakily. Relief and dread tangled together. He typed back, What is it? Not over text. Can we meet tomorrow morning, before work? Ethan hesitated. He didn't know if he could trust her fully, but she was the only person connected to Lena who had shown him even a fraction of compassion. Where? He replied. Harborview Cafe, 8 a.m. After confirming, Ethan set his phone down. The house around him felt smaller, like the walls had crept inward. He suddenly realized something chilling. Lena could return at any moment. She could walk through the door, look at him, lie again without flinching. He wasn't sure he could handle that tonight. He walked through the rooms, checking each doorway, flipping on lights. The house felt foreign now. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every quiet corner felt like it held the ghost of a lie he hadn't uncovered yet. He ended up in the bedroom, the space they had shared for years. He stood at the foot of the bed, staring at the pillows, the picture frames on the nightstand, the faint impression of her body on the mattress. He remembered their first night here. She'd laughed when he tried to carry her over the threshold. They'd talked until sunrise, dreaming about the life they'd build. Lena had held his hand and whispered, We're a team. He felt the old version of himself crumble inside. The space felt poisoned now, tainted by her absence, by the truth that her nights weren't spent beside him anymore, that she had chosen someone else's arms, someone else's life. He gathered a blanket and pillow. Deciding to sleep on the couch if he slept at all, he lay down. Staring at the ceiling, his thoughts spun endlessly. He wanted answers. He wanted justice. But most of all, he wanted his dignity back. Around 4 a.m., his eyes finally drifted closed, only to snap open again at the sound of footsteps outside. He sat up sharply, heart racing. The front door clicked. Slowly, carefully. Someone was unlocking it. Ethan froze. The knob turned, and then Lena stepped inside. She looked startled to see him awake, sitting upright on the couch. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged, and her clothes didn't match what she'd left the house wearing earlier. Her eyes flicked to him. Cold, defensive, not even a trace of guilt. Oh, she said flatly. You're still up. Ethan didn't speak. He just looked at her, really looked, and saw a stranger. Lena sighed dramatically, tossing her purse aside. Can we not do this right now? I'm tired. Ethan held her gaze. What's his name? He asked quietly. She flinched barely, but it was enough. He continued. Not the consultant, the man you were with tonight. Her lips tightened. That's none of your business. His heart twisted. That's where you're wrong, he whispered. Lena glared at him. Look, Ethan, I'm done with this paranoid crap. If you want to talk tomorrow, fine. But right now, I'm going to bed. She turned and walked down the hallway. Ethan didn't follow. He didn't call after her. He didn't beg. Instead, he sat in the quiet house she had filled with lies and made a silent promise to himself. Tomorrow, everything changes. He would meet Sarah. He would gather proof. He would protect himself. And Lena. She would finally face the truth she had buried so deeply She thought he'd never find it. Morning came long before Ethan felt ready for it. He hadn't slept, at least not in any way that mattered. His body had shut down for minutes at a time, but his mind never stopped moving. Never stopped replaying the image of Lena slipping into the house at 4 a.m., wearing clothes she hadn't left in. Her face had carried no remorse, no hesitation, as if the betrayal was no longer something she felt the need to hide. He rose from the couch when sunlight finally bled into the room. The house felt like a battlefield, the air thick with everything unsaid. He took a shower, though the hot water did nothing to wash off the dread clinging to his skin. By the time he stepped outside and headed for Harborview Cafe, his hands were trembling with anticipation or maybe fear. The cafe sat on a quiet corner, overlooking a small park. It smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries. A place that normally brought comfort, today, it felt like the waiting room of a painful truth. Ethan spotted Sarah in a corner booth. She looked smaller than she had at Novalink, almost nervous. Her fingers curled around a steaming mug she didn't seem to be drinking. When she saw him, she offered a tentative smile. "Ethan, thanks for meeting me." He slid into the seat across from her. "What's going on?" Sarah glanced around the cafe to make sure no one was listening. Then she leaned in. "I didn't know if I should say anything yesterday. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But something is very wrong at Novalink," Ethan tensed. "You mean with Lena?" "With Lena," Sarah confirmed. "And with Caleb, and maybe with the company itself," Ethan swallowed. "What do you know?" Sarah hesitated, visibly conflicted. She wasn't a gossip. That much was clear. She was someone who carried her conscience heavily. "About 6 months ago," she began, "Lena started getting special treatment. Meetings behind closed doors. Access to documents she shouldn't have had. She kept saying it was for a new strategic project with Caleb, but no one knew what that meant." Ethan's heart pounded. "Go on." I overheard something once." Sarah admitted. "A conversation between Lena and Caleb in one of the conference rooms. They didn't know I was nearby." She took a shaky breath. "Caleb was telling her that everything was falling into place, that she just needed to stay close to upper management until the funding went through. He said, once the merger happened, they'd have the leverage to move money without raising eyebrows." Ethan felt sick, and Lena agreed. He forced out, "Yes," Sarah whispered. She sounded determined, cold, like she wasn't talking about a job anymore, but a plan. Ethan leaned back, stunned. "So they're stealing from the company," Sarah nodded slowly. "Or they will be, or already have. I don't know which." The floor seemed to tilt beneath him. "What does this have to do with me?" Ethan asked. Though he already suspected, Sarah hesitated again. "Caleb mentioned you once, said you were useful, that you wouldn't ask questions, that you'd make everything look normal as long as Lena kept telling you the right things." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the ribs. Useful. A role. Not a person. His voice came out hoarse. "Did Lena say anything about me?" Sarah looked down. "She said you trusted her too much, that you never questioned her need for freedom or privacy." Caleb laughed and said that meant she had room to maneuver. Ethan felt heat rising in his throat, rage, humiliation, heartbreak all tangled together. "So they were exploiting me." "Yes," Sarah said softly. "And I'm sorry, Ethan. I really am. I didn't know how deep it went until the financial team raised concerns last week." Ethan's pulse spiked. "What concerns?" "There's a discrepancy," Sarah explained. "Funds that don't match internal records, documents missing or sent to unapproved accounts. The CFO is starting to ask questions, and if Lena and Caleb are behind it, they're going to be exposed soon. And if Lena used our joint account," Ethan murmured, "she could drag you into it." Sarah finished. He ran a hand through his hair. The room felt too hot, too small. Sarah reached across the table and touched his arm gently. "You need to protect yourself. Today, before the company takes action, before she does." Ethan looked up sharply. "You think she'd blame me?" I think Caleb will blame anyone except himself, Sarah said. And Lena, she hasn't been the same person lately. She's been cold, secretive, defensive. I don't know what she's capable of if she feels cornered. A long, heavy silence stretched between them. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was steady. What do I do? She pulled out a folder from her bag. I shouldn't have this, but I needed you to see it. The folder contained internal financial reports, ones referencing the same numbers Ethan had found in his accounts, but on a much larger scale. Funds transferred to shell entities, project investments that didn't exist. A pattern of siphoning money. Lena's name appeared on several authorization logs. Ethan stared at the pages until they blurred. How long? He whispered. Almost a year, Sarah said. A year. An entire year of betrayal. Not just romantic, strategic, calculated, criminal. Ethan looked up at Sarah, eyes burning. Why are you telling me this? Because, she said softly, you deserve the truth. And because you're in danger without it. Ethan closed the folder. Thank you, Sarah nodded, though her expression was still troubled. Ethan, please be careful. Caleb isn't just some guy having an affair. He's manipulative, ruthless. If he knows you're on to him, he won't take it lightly. The warning sent a chill down Ethan's spine. They parted with tense goodbyes. Ethan stepped out of the cafe and into the brisk morning air, but the cold did nothing to steady him. He walked to his car on autopilot, the folder clutched in his hand, his thoughts a chaotic storm. When he got home, he set the folder on the dining table next to the growing pile of evidence. The truth was forming a picture, one he couldn't ignore, a picture where Lena had used him. Caleb had manipulated her, and together they had orchestrated something far bigger than infidelity. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed the number Marcus had given him for a lawyer. His finger hovered over the call button but didn't press it yet, because before lawyers and accusations and consequences, he needed one more thing. He needed Lena to look him in the eyes and answer a question he'd been avoiding. Was any of their marriage real? Or had he been nothing more than a convenient cover for the life she truly wanted? He heard the front door open. Lena stepped in, her expression unreadable when she saw him standing there. They stared at each other in a silence so sharp it felt like glass. Ethan took a breath. Sit down, he said, his voice calm. We're talking now. Lena's jaw tightened. But she sat. This time, Ethan wasn't afraid of the truth. This time, he was demanding it. For a long moment, Lena didn't speak. She crossed her legs, folded her arms, and stared at Ethan with a mixture of annoyance and caution, as though she were sitting across from a coworker, challenging her in a boardroom, not a husband, asking for the truth about their life. Ethan, however, was calm in a way he hadn't felt in days. Not numb, not broken, just tired of drowning in uncertainty. He placed the folder Sarah had given him on the table, next to the receipts and financial documents he'd collected. He watched Lena's eyes flick to the pile, then flick away. You've been busy, she said coolly. Not as busy as you, Ethan replied. Her jaw tightened. Let's start with something simple, he said. Why did you lie to me last night? Lena leaned back in her chair. Because I didn't feel like having this conversation. Not while you were acting paranoid. This isn't paranoia, Ethan said. It's evidence. He tapped the folder. Something flashed across Lena's expression. Fear, irritation, calculation, but it disappeared almost instantly. You went through my private things, she said. That's a violation, Ethan. He almost laughed. We're really going to talk about violations. You disappeared for an entire night to sleep with another man. Her lips twitched, but she maintained eye contact. I already told you Caleb and I got close. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And you're not innocent here. You haven't been supportive. You haven't listened. Don't, Ethan warned softly. Don't turn this into something I caused. Lena opened her mouth, but Ethan lifted a hand to stop her. I'm done letting you rewrite reality, he said. Done letting you gaslight me into thinking I imagined your betrayal. Her shoulders stiffened. The mask she always wore composed Superior began to crack. Ethan continued, his voice steady. This is not about emotions anymore, Lena. This is about what you've been doing at Novalink. With Caleb. Her eyes widened just a fraction. But enough. I don't know what you think you found, she said slowly. But I found emails, Ethan cut in. Confidential documents you forwarded to him. Money you transferred. Files that don't belong outside the company. Lena swallowed. He pushed the folder toward her. And I'm not the only one asking questions. Novalink is starting to notice too. Lena stared at the folder but didn't touch it. Her hands trembled slightly, so slightly, that if Ethan hadn't spent 8 years memorizing her body language, he wouldn't have seen it. Who told you that? She whispered. Sarah. Lena's expression twisted into something venomous. Of course, she's always been jealous of me, jealous of my promotions. Jealous that I got to work with Caleb. Jealous that I— Stop, Ethan said again, this time with more force. Something in his tone silenced her. You're deflecting, he continued. You do it every time, and I let you get away with it. Not now. Lena's mouth opened, but she didn't speak. Ethan leaned forward. Why are you sending company documents to Caleb? Why are you moving money into his consultancy? What are you two planning? Her silence was deafening. He waited. She finally exhaled sharply. You don't understand how corporate strategy works. These things are complex. You're twisting everything out of context. Ethan laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in days, though it was humorless. Context. Lena, there is no context in which forwarding confidential data to a private email is strategy. You're being dramatic, she said. No, he said quietly. I'm being informed. When she didn't respond, Ethan changed direction. How long? Lena blinked. What? How long has this been going on? With Caleb? With the documents? With the money? She looked away. Her fingers tapped against her leg. A few months. Try again, Ethan said. I've seen records from nearly a year ago. Lena froze, and that was the moment something inside Ethan finally broke, not loudly, not violently, but with a quiet, devastating certainty. You were lying to me before the affair even started, he whispered. This wasn't weakness or loneliness. This was deliberate. You built an entire second life and used me as cover. Lena's face hardened. I did what I had to do. The simplicity of the sentence, its coldness shook him. You had a husband, Ethan said, voice trembling. You had someone who trusted you. I had someone who held me back. Lena snapped. Ethan recoiled. She noticed, but she didn't soften. You never understood my ambition, she said. You never understood what I wanted for my career. So you stole from your company, Ethan asked. Risked everything, risked prison. Her eyes flashed. You think you know everything, but you don't. Caleb said the company deserved it. They've been exploiting employees for years. We were just taking what we were owed. He convinced you of that, Ethan said. Not because it's true, but because he needed you. Lena shook her head. Don't you dare talk about things you don't understand. Caleb believes in me. He sees what I'm capable of. Ethan stared at her, stunned. He's using you. He values me. She shot back. Something you never did. That was the final blow. Not the loudest, but the cruelest. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, taking in the person she had become, the person he had helped build a life with, unaware she was building a different life behind his back. You really believe that? He asked softly. That I didn't value you? Lena hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. But instead of apologizing, she said, You were. Predictable. Comforting, but predictable. Caleb made me feel alive again. He made me feel like I mattered. And I didn't, Ethan asked. You were safe, she said. But I wanted more. Ethan nodded slowly. Not because he agreed, but because he finally understood. Their marriage wasn't broken by one affair or one lie. It had been breaking in tiny fractures. Lena hid behind ambition and secrecy. But still, there was one more truth he needed. Did you ever love me? He asked. Lena's lips parted. Silence stretched. Finally, she said, I loved the stability you gave me. Not him, not the man, not the partner. The stability, a function, not a feeling. Ethan stood up. He didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't rage. His heart felt scraped, clean, raw, but steady, clear. I'm contacting a lawyer, he said quietly, and I'm giving Novalink everything. Lena's face snapped up. You can't, Ethan. I could lose everything. You already lost everything, he said. You just don't know it yet. She stood abruptly. If you expose me, Caleb will. Caleb will throw you under the bus. First chance he gets, Ethan said. And you know it. Her breath hitched. Fear finally cracked through the surface. Ethan walked to the door and opened it. Leave, he said. Lena stared at him, stunned. You can't be serious. Leave, he repeated. She hesitated for pride, for anger, for desperation, but ultimately grabbed her purse and walked out. When the door shut behind her, the house fell silent. But this time, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was liberating. Ethan turned back to the pile of evidence. He picked up the folder, exhaled, and whispered to no one, It's time to finish this. And for the first time since the nightmare began, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Control. The house felt hollow after Lena left, as if her absence had sucked out the last remnants of warmth and history. For years, Ethan had imagined that if they ever fought this badly, he would collapse under the weight of it. But now, strangely, he felt steadier than he expected. Not calm. He was nowhere near calm, but clear. Clear, in a way. Pain can sometimes carve out clarity. He sat at the table again, surrounded by the documents that had become a map of betrayal, receipts, emails, transfers, spreadsheets, evidence of months, maybe years of deception, evidence of a version of Lena he had never truly known. His phone pinged, a text from Marcus. How'd it go? Ethan typed back. Worse than expected. I'm calling the lawyer today. 3 dots appeared. Then, I'm here if you need anything. Don't back down. He wouldn't. Not anymore. An hour later, Ethan dialed the number Marcus had given him for the attorney Daniel Hargrove, a man known throughout Harborview for handling high-profile fraud cases. When the receptionist heard Ethan mention both joint accounts and corporate misconduct, she scheduled him in immediately. By noon, Ethan was sitting in Daniel's office, a minimalist space filled with dark wood furniture and framed law degrees. The man himself was in his 40s, with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority without effort. Tell me everything, Daniel said. So Ethan did. He told him about the text message, the hotel, the affair, the financial transfers, the emails, the internal Novalink documents, and Lena's blatant indifference when confronted. Daniel took notes, his expression unreadable. When Ethan finished, the lawyer leaned back. You're dealing with 3 issues here: marital betrayal, financial misconduct, and corporate theft. Any one of these is enough to warrant immediate legal action. Ethan exhaled shakily. What do I need to do? Daniel steepled his fingers. First, distance yourself legally and financially. That means freezing the joint account before more money disappears. Second, protect yourself from liability. If Novalink uncovers the scheme, and they will, you must demonstrate you were not involved. Ethan nodded. I already gathered evidence. Good, Daniel said. But you'll need more. Dates, bank statements, screenshots, anything proving Lena acted independently. I have that, Ethan said quietly. Daniel's eyes softened slightly. I know this is difficult, but you're doing the right thing. She endangered you financially, emotionally, and potentially criminally. Ethan swallowed. What about divorce? Daniel nodded. We'll file for separation immediately. Once the financial investigation at Novalink unfolds, that separation will protect you from being held accountable. Ethan leaned forward. There's something else. Do, do I tell the company? Daniel studied him. Do you want to? Ethan didn't answer right away. He remembered Lena's face when he confronted her. The defiance, the contempt, the total lack of remorse. If I don't, Ethan said quietly, someone else might think I was involved. Daniel nodded. Then yes. You inform them, professionally, not emotionally. You provide them with evidence and let their legal department handle the rest. Ethan inhaled deeply. It felt like stepping into a storm with no guarantee of getting out dry. But he would not be collateral damage in a crime he didn't commit. When the meeting ended, Daniel gave him a list of next steps. Ethan left the office with a folder of instructions and a letter drafted for Novalink's legal team. The next step, the hardest step, lay ahead. He sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the letter. Once he delivered it, everything would change. Not just his marriage, not just his financial future, but Lena's entire world. He never wanted to destroy her. Even now, with everything she'd done, part of him still grieved for the person he thought she was, but he had to protect himself. He drove to Novalink. The building loomed tall, glass shimmering under the afternoon sun. When he entered, the receptionist greeted him politely, but her expression shifted to concern when she saw the seriousness on his face. I need to speak with your legal department, Ethan said, 5 minutes later. He was led into a small conference room where a corporate attorney named Claire Weston introduced herself. She was sharp, composed, and wasted no time. What brings you in today? Ethan placed Daniel's letter on the table. This. Claire read it silently. Her expression didn't change, but her posture did, straightening slightly. Alert. Do you have supporting evidence? She asked. Ethan nodded. I brought copies. Emails, screenshots, statements, transfers, everything that pointed to Lena and Caleb's misconduct. Claire's brows furrowed as she scanned through the documents. This is substantial, she said slowly. And deeply concerning, she looked at Ethan. There will be an internal investigation, likely an external one as well. Your cooperation will be essential, but based on what I'm seeing, you did the right thing by coming to us. Ethan nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and grief. He wasn't betraying his wife. He was revealing the truth she had buried. Claire gathered the documents. We will contact you soon. Do not inform Lena or Caleb. We need them unaware for now. I won't, Ethan said. When Ethan left the building, his steps felt heavier. He had just set into motion the unraveling of Lena's professional life, something she had spent years building, but she had been the one to endanger it, not him. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper, as though the world itself knew a shift had taken place. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. We need to talk tonight. Ethan stared at the message. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I want to fix this. Just another demand. Another deflection. He didn't reply. Instead, he headed home, already feeling the weight of the confrontation that awaited him. When he arrived, Lena was already there, pacing the living room, agitation radiating from her. The moment she saw him, she crossed her arms. We need to talk, she snapped. He walked past her calmly and set his keys down. I already did. Her brows drew together. What's that supposed to mean? Ethan met her gaze steadily. I spoke to a lawyer. Her face blanched. What? And Novalink. Her breath hitched sharp, immediate panic flooding her expression. You didn't, she whispered. You couldn't. I did. Lena's face twisted rage, fear, disbelief, all colliding. She stepped toward him, voice rising. Do you have any idea what you've done? You just destroyed my career, my future, everything I've worked for. No, Ethan said firmly. You did that. I simply refuse to go down with you. You're pathetic, she spat. Caleb was right about you. Ethan's heart froze, but he didn't react. He didn't crumble. He didn't even flinch. That may be, he said quietly. But at least I'm not a criminal. Lena's mouth opened, ready to argue. or plead, or manipulate, but no words came out. For the first time, the power dynamic shifted. She wasn't the confident one anymore. He was. Lena stepped back, chest rising and falling quickly, as reality settled in. "This isn't over," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "It is." She stared at him, wounded and furious. But she could see it in his eyes. There was nothing left to salvage. Not the trust, not the marriage, not the woman he once loved. Lena grabbed her coat, stormed out, and slammed the door. This time, the silence didn't suffocate Ethan. It freed him. He sat down at the table, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had shattered, but also by the first pieces of a life rebuilding itself. It wasn't over yet. There were still consequences coming, still revelations to face, still pain to unravel. But for the first time, Ethan wasn't afraid. He was ready. Ethan didn't move for several minutes after Lena slammed the door. He simply sat there, elbows on the table, fingers woven together, staring at the evidence spread before him like a map of his own unraveling life. But beneath the exhaustion, beneath the grief that had burned through him for days, there was something else forming, a thin but unmistakable thread of strength. Not anger, not vengeance, just the quiet certainty that he had survived the worst part already. He stood slowly, walked to the kitchen sink, and splashed cold water on his face. His reflection in the window startled him. His eyes looked older, tired, but clearer than they'd been in years. The kind of clarity that comes only after illusions are shattered. He had confronted Lena. He had protected himself legally. He had exposed the truth to Novalink. Now came the part he had never prepared for, rebuilding whatever remained of his life. But not alone. At 7 p.m., Marcus arrived unannounced, knocking 3 times before letting himself in like he always did. "You didn't answer my texts," Marcus said as he stepped into the living room. "I needed space," Ethan replied. Marcus took one look at him and frowned. "You look like you've been microwaved. That feels about right." Marcus closed the door behind him. "How'd she take it?" Ethan exhaled. "Exactly how you'd expect. Anger, threats, blaming me for ruining her life. She called me pathetic." Marcus shrugged. "Well, that's textbook narcissism. It still hurt." "I know," Marcus said, sitting beside him. "But her version of the truth is collapsing. She's panicking. People cling to cruelty when they're losing control." Ethan nodded, grateful for the steady presence at his side. "So what now?" Marcus asked gently. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "The lawyer's handling the legal side. Novalink will investigate. But me, I feel like I'm standing in the ashes of my life and don't know where to start rebuilding." Marcus leaned back. "You start with yourself. Nothing else makes sense until you do." Those words lingered long after Marcus left. The next morning, Ethan acted on them. He searched online for a therapist and booked the earliest appointment. He didn't know what he would say or how much he would cry, but he knew he couldn't sort through this alone, and that's how he found himself sitting in a softly lit office 2 days later, facing Dr. Maya Ellison. She was warm-eyed, soft-spoken, with silver streaks in her curly hair that made her look like wisdom in human form. "Tell me why you're here," she said. Ethan didn't know where to begin. The story spilled out of him in fragments. First the text, then the hotel, then the affair, then the stolen money, then the lies. As he spoke, his voice cracked, steadied, cracked again. For the first time, someone listened without judging, without interrupting, without rushing him to conclusions. And when he finished, Dr. Maya leaned forward slightly. "Ethan," she said gently, "what happened to you wasn't just betrayal. It was psychological erosion, manipulation, gaslighting, a systematic dismantling of your trust in yourself." He blinked. "So I wasn't crazy for doubting." "You weren't crazy," she said. "You were conditioned. That level of deception changes the way the mind protects itself. You survived by trusting even when she didn't deserve it." A lump formed in his throat. "I keep wondering how I didn't see it sooner." What's wrong with me that I didn't notice? There is nothing wrong with you, Doctor, Maya said firmly. Trust is not a flaw. Pain does not mean you failed. And love often blinds us to the parts of others that are already broken. He swallowed hard, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. And now, he asked softly. Now, she said, you heal, piece by piece. Ethan left the session with a strange mixture of heaviness and relief. The hurt was still there deep, raw, but it felt like someone had put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You're allowed to feel this." He stopped by the shoreline on the drive home. The evening sun cast the harbor in gold, seabirds drifting lazily above the waves. Ethan walked along the water, the breeze cool against his face. It reminded him of quieter times, days before the lies, before the fear, before Caleb's shadow entered his life. As he stood there, he whispered to himself, "You're still here. You're still breathing. You're still you," a truth he needed to repeat until he believed it. Over the next week, he saw Dr. Maya twice more. He journaled, he walked, he let the house be messy for once. He cooked simple meals instead of forcing routine. He talked to Marcus nearly every day. Slowly, painfully, he began to imagine a future not defined by Lena's betrayal, a future where he wasn't someone's stability, but his own. But the peace was fragile, constantly threatened by the looming consequences of Lena's actions. Novalink called him 3 days after he submitted the documents. Claire's voice was polite but tense. "We need to schedule a formal statement," she said. "The investigation is accelerating." "Is Lena cooperating?" Ethan asked. A pause. Then, "She's reacting strongly," which meant Ethan knew that she was unraveling. Later that afternoon, Ethan discovered just how much. There was a knock on his door, furious, rapid, shaking the frame. He opened it cautiously. Lena stood there, wild-eyed, mascara smudged, hair tangled as though she had run her hands through it 1,000 times. She looked nothing like the polished, controlled version of herself he had always known. "You destroyed everything," she screamed the moment she saw him. Ethan stiffened. "Lena, calm down." "Don't you dare tell me to calm down," she yelled. "Do you know what they did today? They suspended me. They froze my accounts. They're threatening to call the police." Ethan inhaled. "I warned you this would happen." "No," she seethed. "You made this happen. You could have protected me. You could have stayed silent." "Silent while you dragged me into a crime?" Ethan asked. "While you used our money? While you ruined your career?" "No, Lena. I protected myself." She stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You betrayed me." Ethan's heart cracked open, not because she said the words, but because of how deeply she believed them. "No," he said softly. "You betrayed us." She shook her head violently. "Caleb was right. You're weak. You don't understand the world I wanted. You never did. Caleb isn't going to save you," Ethan said. "He's going to protect himself, even if it means sacrificing you." Her face flickered with uncertainty, but only for a moment. "You'll regret this," she hissed. He didn't respond. After a long, trembling breath, she turned and stormed off. Her footsteps echoed down the sidewalk long after she disappeared. Ethan closed the door gently, leaning his forehead against the wood. His hands trembled, but it wasn't fear this time. It was finality. The collapse was complete. Whatever bond had existed between them was gone. And yet, that night he returned to Dr. Maya's words. Trust is not a flaw. Pain does not mean you failed. For the first time in weeks, Ethan let himself cry. Not the broken, desperate sobbing from the first nights, but a deep, cleansing grief. A grieving for the love he gave freely, for the future he once believed in, for the man he had been before the truth shattered him. When the tears finally stopped, he wiped his face, breathed deeply, and whispered into the quiet house, "You're getting your life back." And for the first time, he believed it. Ethan expected that the fallout from exposing Lena and Caleb would be swift, but he underestimated just how quickly the corporate world could shift when threatened. It began with a call from Novalink's legal department. Short, clipped, urgent. Claire Weston requested that he come in for a follow-up meeting, as developments have accelerated. When he arrived, she greeted him with a nod far more serious than their first encounter. Her posture was firm, hands clasped on the conference table. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Cole," she said. "We have updates." Ethan lowered into the chair. "Is it bad?" Claire hesitated. "It's significant." She slid a document across the table. Ethan skimmed the headline. "Nova Link Finance Audit. Discovered irregularities linked to consultant Caleb Rowan. Internal leak under investigation." His stomach clenched. Claire continued. "Your wife was confronted this morning. We attempted a routine review of her access logs. When she realized the scope of what we were investigating, she became uncooperative. Security had to escort her out." Ethan swallowed. "Is she fired?" "Not yet, but she has been suspended, and depending on what external auditors find, she may face criminal charges." He stared at the table, a mixture of sadness and inevitability washing over him. "And Caleb?" Claire exhaled. "Gone, gone," Ethan echoed. "He didn't show up for work today. His company-issued devices were wiped, and his office cleared out overnight. It appears he anticipated the investigation and fled." The words hit like a blow. So Caleb had run, just as Marcus predicted. Run, and left Lena behind to take the fall. "Police are involved," Claire added. "But locating him may be difficult." Ethan couldn't help letting out a bitter laugh. He used her, then he vanished. Claire's eyes softened. "I'm sorry. I know this must be painful." Painful didn't begin to cover it. It was devastating to realize Lena had gambled everything, her marriage, her integrity, her future, on a man who discarded her the second things got dangerous. But even worse were the questions swirling beneath the surface. Had she known he was this kind of man? Had she believed his promises blindly, just as Ethan once believed hers? Or had she seen the truth and chosen to ignore it? Claire spoke again, pulling him from his thoughts. "One more thing. Lena tried to claim that you were aware of the transactions." Ethan's breath caught. "What?" "We have it documented," Claire said gently. "She insisted you approved several of the transfers, that you were involved." He felt the blood drain from his face. "But we don't believe her," she added quickly. "Your evidence, your timeline, and your willingness to cooperate paint a very different picture." "But Ethan," she tried. A cold shiver crawled up his spine. So that was who Lena had become. The meeting ended with legal formalities, statements, signatures, guidelines, but Ethan barely remembered them. As he left Nova Link, his legs felt heavy, as if gravity had thickened around him. Lena hadn't just cheated. She hadn't just lied. She had tried to sacrifice him to save herself. He drove aimlessly for a while, before pulling over into a quiet parking lot near the harbor. He stared at the waves crashing against the rocks, letting the truth sink in deeper. The woman he married, the one he once trusted, with every vulnerable part of himself no longer existed. Or maybe she had never existed. Maybe the real Lena had always been hidden beneath ambition, insecurity, and the thrill of risk he didn't know anymore. His phone buzzed. "Marcus, saw the news." "You okay?" Ethan typed back. "Trying to be." Marcus responded immediately. "Come over if you need to. Don't sit alone with this." Ethan hesitated, but he didn't want silence tonight. He didn't want to feel the walls of his empty home closing in. He drove to Marcus's apartment. Inside, they sat on the worn couch with 2 mugs of tea that Marcus insisted had healing properties, though Ethan doubted anything herbal could repair the damage Lena left behind. Marcus didn't push him to talk. He just sat there, offering presence instead of solutions. Eventually, Ethan began. "She tried to pin it on me." Marcus swore under his breath. "I knew she'd panic, but, damn, I thought I'd reached the limit of how much she could hurt me," Ethan whispered. "Then she found another way." Marcus leaned forward. "Listen to me. Someone who betrays you that deeply isn't your responsibility anymore. Her downfall isn't yours to carry. I don't want her life to fall apart, Ethan said softly. I just don't want it to destroy mine. That's exactly why you had to come forward. Marcus rested a firm hand on his shoulder. And Ethan, I'm proud of you. Those words hit unexpectedly hard. Ethan inhaled shakily. You didn't collapse, Marcus added. You faced the truth. You protected yourself. That takes strength. I'm not sure I'd have. Ethan's throat tightened. It doesn't feel like strength. It is, Marcus said. Trust me. The two men sat in heavy silence for a long time. Outside, Harborview lights shimmered over the water, indifferent to the lives unraveling beneath them. Later that night, Ethan returned home to a voicemail from Claire. She spoke calmly, but the message's content jolted him. Ethan, we've just learned that Caleb may have been funneling money through multiple shell companies, not just Novalink's funds, but also personal accounts of employees involved. We have reason to believe he manipulated more than one person. Your wife may have been only one component of a larger scheme. Ethan's pulse quickened. A larger scheme, a web wider than he imagined. And Ethan, Claire added before the voicemail ended, if Caleb contacts you, let us know immediately. Ethan hung up, unsettled. Would Caleb contact him? Why would he? What would he want? He rubbed his face, as if the emotional wreckage wasn't enough. Now there was the threat of entanglement in something criminal and dangerous. As he walked into the kitchen, something bright caught his eye, an envelope lying on the counter. He hadn't noticed it earlier. His name was written on the front. His heartbeat quickened as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, slanted, urgent. Ethan, we need to talk. I can explain everything. Please meet me. You're the only one I can trust. Lena. She included a location, an empty parking lot near Harborview Pier. Tonight. Midnight. Ethan stared at the note until the lines blurred. After everything she had done, after she tried to pull him into her downfall, after he exposed her, she wanted him to meet her. He didn't know if she was desperate or manipulative or scared or hiding something even worse. But he knew one thing. Whatever Lena wanted to say tonight, it wouldn't be simple, and it wouldn't be safe emotionally or otherwise. Ethan folded the letter, took a long breath, and whispered into the empty room. This ends tonight. He didn't yet know what ending awaited him. Closure, confrontation, confession, or another twist in a story that refused to stop unraveling. But he would show up, not for her, for the truth, and for the man he was becoming. In the end, Ethan's story reminds us that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who teach us the hardest lessons. Healing doesn't come from pretending things didn't hurt. It comes from choosing yourself, even when the pain feels unbearable. Trust is a gift, not a weakness, and walking away from someone who has forgotten your worth is an act of courage, not loss. Life will break us in unexpected ways, but it will also rebuild us stronger, clearer, and more honest with ourselves. If you've ever had to let go of someone you thought would stay forever, know this: your future is not defined by their betrayal, but by your resilience. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Ethan's journey resonated with you the most? And if you'd like more stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.